Okay. So yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Carla Bailo. She's a leader in engineering and vehicle program with 35 years of experience in the automotive industry. She is the president and CEO of the Center for Automotive Research in Michigan. So that Center for Automotive Research is also known as CARS. So yeah, we are very fortunate to have Carla talking to us today. So it's as a part of our Future Leaders program for our center, and it's also a webinar for our center. So with this, I would like to invite Carla to enlighten us on smart cities and what's going on in that area.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you all today from snowy Michigan, as I was talking about earlier, if you were already connected. I'm an engineer by background, by training, and all my career was focused on developing vehicles and developing autonomous, connected, leading edge technologies, especially in the later years of my career. So actually, when I left industry and went into academia and actually moved to Columbus, my mind was completely changed because I saw the application for Smart City Challenge and convinced many people within the city it'd be a good thing to do. But then I quickly realized that technology isn't the answer for everything. And sometimes as engineers, we tend to think technology can rule the world and we can just go. But I quickly learned that people are a big factor in this, in human behavior, in human acceptance, and human trust, and how we can really use technology to better the lives of those that live in the city. So this presentation is going to be a lot about, how you need to work with people, what you need to think about when you work with your municipality, and hopefully I can share some of the learnings that I went through with you all. And I would appreciate your questions as well. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm hoping it will work. Okay, I just pulled up, here we go. I have too many things open, so bear with me. But I got it now, so we're good.
Yeah, we can see it.
Good, and now I've got it in presenter mode. So as I mentioned, really talking about the integration of cities, mobility, and human behavior. And can it even be seamless? And what are things to think about when you really want to make that seamless interaction? So when we think about cities, we think about why were cities first developed? Why did we make cities? Why did cities begin to exist? It's because it was a place for people to live, work, and chat and talk about the issues of the day. Now we've kind of lost that livability. Also, it was a place where they could open their own shops. They could work there. They could work with others there. It was a place to commune. It was a place to think about future endeavors. And then now, as we've come into the new era, we often talk about sustainability and the importance of sustainability, but never has it been more focused than it is in today's world. When we think about the circular economy, we think about reusing, recycling, and repurposing. And these are all the things that you have to keep in mind as you begin to think about how technology can lead in all of these elements. And it's more than just mobility. It's every aspect of the city. And as we've seen now with COVID-19, and smart cities are going to start to morph because of COVID-19, the impact that data and sensor technologies can have in the future, to help us with these kind of pandemics or other emergency responses. So I talked a little bit about, what a city should look like. So what does it need? What do we need to have in the cities to enable being connected and being able to acquire the data that we need? Clearly, sensors need to be a big part of that, be it cameras, be it infrared, be it traffic signals. We need to think about all the different sensors, because without that data and understanding of what's happening in your city, what your city's pulse is, it's really hard to use technology to make it better. We need to understand that data, which means we need to get rid of data that maybe doesn't add a lot to the equation. We are just overwhelmed with data. The amount of data coming in, most cities don't have a clue how to manage it all, how to sort it, how to analyze it. And there aren't enough people today that really understand how to do that either. There are a lot of universities stepping up to do data analytics programs, but it is a skill set that is lacking throughout most city services today. And then, of course, automation. And when we talk about automation, it's more than just vehicle automation and smart mobility, but it's also about automation of, let's say, supply chain, automation of repetitive tasks, which that leads you into, when you think of more automation, I think we're going to see more of this again because of COVID-19 and the necessity to separate people and social distancing. That's going to open up a whole new era of retraining and continuous learning throughout every individual's life as we go forward. So this is a very busy chart, but it's really important because it talks about the 3 elements that are necessary to reach the sweet spot in the center, which is connected and automated intelligent transportation systems. You have to have the smart city that is equipped with all of the ITS systems. And I've listed them all there, everything from traffic monitoring to message signs to dynamic lane changing, what's happening with incidents, not only accidents, but near misses, adaptive signal control. Also, we need to have connectivity to the vehicles themselves. We need to have it coming from GPS, GNSS, cellular connectivity. It includes the telematics that are currently on the vehicles as well. And then, of course, automated vehicle systems, which today are your advanced driver avoidance systems. All of the things that, stop the vehicle when it senses an issue and or tells you you're departing out of your lane. We are moving more into adaptive systems where the car is doing the work for the driver, but for the most part, most of these require the driver to be alert and doing something. When you begin to combine 2 of these elements, you get into even more detailed help. So when you put automation with intelligent transportations, for example, you can begin to actually get personal response and be able to have the driver engage with the infrastructure and do things more smartly, so to speak. Then connectivity with ITS. These are a lot of things that you already see today in terms of tolling systems, but you can also begin to give emergency vehicles signal prioritization. You can have automatic 911 calling. And then all of this comes together to create connected and automated ITS in the center, which is full automation and really to have infrastructure ready for self-driving vehicles. So this is kind of what we've done in the history of the world, or especially in the US. Every time we want to run out of room in our cities or on our highways, what do? We add more lanes. Then what happens? Within a short amount of time, typically, we fill that up. So we build more, we fill that up. We find new clover leaves, new ways, but we fill it up. So no matter what we have done, we continue to just fill it up. And so the idea is, with private vehicles, without a sharing economy, we can only scale so much. And then we really have to start looking at how we can use infrastructure much more efficiently. And let's just take the case of most DOTs today. Since the 70s, fundamentally, the vehicle gas tax, which is how most DOTs are funded, they've been on a diet. Engines have gotten more efficient. Fuel economy has gotten better. Fuel requirements aren't what they used to be. So the revenues coming from gas tax has basically been decreasing in most economies. Now, some states, of course, have toll roads, et cetera, which help to supplant that. But it's not such a sustainable model in the future when we think about it. So the money that's available to even begin to enlarge roadways doesn't exist. And as we've seen in many states, my state in particular, in Michigan, the roads there's no money to even repair them. They're in a state of disrepair, and bridges throughout the world are in a state of disrepair. So really, when you think about a city, and let's focus on parking, and let's focus on a city that's designed for individual usage. That city is exactly what we have in most municipalities today, meaning we have building codes that require X amount of parking spaces for whatever building it is that we're building. If it's an office building, it has to have X number of parking spaces. If it's a shopping center, it has to have X number of parking spaces. A restaurant has to have X number of parking spaces for the number of clientele that are allowed in that restaurant. Now, it varies city to city, but fundamentally, we design our cities around roadways and parking lots. And if you remember what I said in the very beginning, that's not what cities are about. Cities didn't develop because they wanted to put in roadways and parking lots. They developed for people to live and work and cohabitate. So when you think about a city that's built for private cars, parking is probably one of the lowest land value usages that exists. And there was a study that was done by IDEO, and if you look at their website, you can probably see this study, where they went through a city and put the value of a bike rack, of a front window display, of a curb, and parking was some of the lowest value in the city. Although cities get revenue from it, really it was curb space that was highly valued. And if we think about cars going around looking for parking spaces, fundamentally that doesn't help with congestion, it doesn't help with air quality. There's a number of things that are disadvantaged by that. And a little fact, you can put the whole city of San Francisco into the parking lots in Los Angeles. So what could we do with all that space if we could take it back from the vehicle parking? One thing that I find really compelling with COVID-19 are the number of cities that have basically blocked off lanes so people can get out and get exercise, be it walking or bicycling. And I'm going to hate to see that revert back when this is over, that again, cars are going to take up the roadways. Because there's a lot to be said about multimodality and being able to help us with these congestion issues. The picture on the right is really quite funny because we know what real estate is like in San Francisco, and this company or these startups decided they were just going to throw out picnic tables and other tables and rent out parking spaces 24 hours a day because it's a lot cheaper than actually renting a building. So in order to reduce the reliance on personal vehicles, and by the way, I call your personal vehicle your personal mobility security blanket. It's something that costs you about $750 a month on average, maybe even more now, that you only use about 5% of the time. But you have it because you know it's always there, you know where it is, and you know it can get you where you need to go next. And there isn't an integrated network today in most cities that allows you that same kind of confidence. So the way to do that is by offering a plethora of ways that people can get around, and let them make that choice, and let it make it seamless for them in terms of payment. So quality public transit is one of the best ways to move large amounts of people at a reasonable pace and at a reasonable cost, typically. Now, how this changes with COVID, I mean, these are all fun studies that have to happen. Multimodal integration, I mentioned the common payment. If you want to use a scooter or a bike and then go on the bus, you should be able to just have to pay one time from one account, and the money gets divided up. You need to also have the right infrastructure for all of that micromobility so that everybody on the roadway is safe and is trusting that they'll be safe in whatever path they're riding in. one of the keys is public partnerships, because in the past, a lot of this onus is up to the city or to the public transit provider. And quite frankly, they're under very fixed budgets as well. And so the businesses are pointing at the cities to do something, and the public transit, because they need people to get to work. And the cities then are saying, hey, I don't have money, you need to do something, you need to manage it yourself. But some of the most successful examples are companies that have banded together and say, we have this problem getting our people to and from work. What's the best solution that we can get? And sometimes it's public transit, but sometimes it's partnering with someone like Via or another ride-sharing source that crowdsources rides to and from those business districts. So it has to be an all-inclusive conversation. And of course, the regulations, policy, and incentives are a big part of this. We encountered with Smart Columbus so many roadblocks once we started trying to do some of the things that we had put in the proposal, and ended up having to morph some of them, and rightly so. But regulations and policy don't move at the same speed of technology, but they can hinder technology. So you have to work with those bodies that are managing those particular elements. And it's really one of the first things, one of my biggest lessons when I went into working at the university, and probably you all know this being from the university, but really getting integrated with your governments, getting to know everybody who's in office, because, and saying the right things to make them understand the technologies, and more importantly, how it can help the quality of life in their city, because that's how you can enable that engine, not only from the public sector, but from the private sector, to get the funding that you need. So clearly, as we continue to find this multimodal culture, this chart to me just makes absolute sense. Depending how long the trip is, will decide your options as a customer. And you can choose any of those options, but they'll become more viable depending on the trip distance. So then I said I was going to talk about people. And one of the things that I learned right away in the Smart City Challenge was the people, or the citizens of the community, had more concerns or had more ideas than we gave them credit for them when we wrote the proposal. For example, as part of our proposal, there was a very underserved neighborhood. And this underserved neighborhood was very close to the university, within 4 miles, separated, of course, from the better side of town by a roadway, a highway, and only a bridge went across, and that bridge could not be transversed by feet. So it was purposely done. A lot of that happened back when the roadways were first established, to separate the good side of town from bad side of the town, very intentionally. But anyway, this group had about 32,000, or still has about 32,000 residents, not a single grocery, so it was a food desert, not a single doctor or dentist, so a healthcare desert, and had 4 times the national average of infant mortality. And if you were born there, you had less than a 20% chance of moving out of that particular quality of life. So we put in our proposal, we were going to give them first mile, last mile access to the bus, and we were going to put a bus rapid transit line that would go right through their neighborhood to help them get to the various places of employment. So we went there to announce that we won. Secretary Fox and everybody came to this area called Linden, and all of these cars, the folks that lived there had never seen so many cars parking, and there was no parking, of course, so we're parking on, on lawns, or on public lawns, I should say, or just on the berms or whatever. And they began to gather and just watch us all walking towards this elementary school where we were going to announce it. And finally, one of them asked, why are you all here today? What's going on? And so we said, well, of course, haven't you heard? We won the Smart City Challenge. It's been all over the news. It's been, on the internet, and we're here to make the public announcement today with all the mayor and the senators and others. And this person said, ma'am, I don't know what's going on unless somebody puts a flyer in my door. So we quickly thought, I don't maybe think smart shuttles are necessarily the solution here. Maybe first we need to be thinking about Wi-Fi hotspots. So we completely morphed it, and actually from there we decided we had to have community meetings at the community center to hear what the real issues were there. What were their mobility challenges? What were their educational challenges? So we could begin to put together the right proposal for them. So we always have to remember that a city is not a factory. And those of us who've worked in factories and rationalized systems and optimized systems, it's really a tough lesson. But they're very complex, they're very adaptable, and they're driven by the people who live there. And people are not often rational, and cities sometimes are not rational either. And that's a feature. That's what makes the personality of the city the personality of the city. But always remember that things that work in a corporate situation may not work in city solutions. You have to adapt. So why might citizens be concerned about the technologies that we're talking about? So here we have fear of surveillance. So many of us easily push the button to accept the terms and conditions of an app on our phone. But if there is any version of corporate surveillance or government surveillance, people automatically begin to think the worst. Uncle Sam is watching me, or Big Brother's watching me. There has to be a benefit to both sides. Yes, we're going to do this surveillance, we're going to do this monitoring, we're going to put the sensor in, but this is how it will benefit you. I think it's going to be really compelling, again, after COVID-19, when we begin to screen people for their temperatures or begin to analyze perhaps the way they're moving and using artificial intelligence to judge if they might be ill, to see how far we're going to go with this surveillance. But again, most people in industry today that we're talking about putting in this surveillance before they return to work, it's okay because they believe it will help to keep them safe and healthy. This is a great one, fear of exclusion. We already have many cities that persons with disabilities, be they physical, and let's not forget mental disabilities, that they already face problems getting around. And if they think of these automated products where, wheelchair ramps may be operated totally without a person, it makes everyone nervous. And we have to be sure that when we're thinking of technology, we're thinking how everyone can use that technology. Fear of obsolescence. This is one I've heard over and over again. And I mentioned earlier, we're in an era of continuous learning, but we need to be ahead of it. So, for example, every time we've had any kind of a revolution of any kind, a technological revolution, everyone's been afraid of losing their job. And in essence, in every time we've been able to morph almost everyone into something new that needs to be managed. So we need to think, when we start talking about these things, who really has potential to lose their job? And then how shall we begin to retrain them? And with the exponential pace of technology these days, that's going to happen all the time. And we need to be ready for that. We need to be thinking about what we need to have in place to be sure that we're able to keep people up to speed on the technology and very employable. This one has been around for years about negative health effects, and it continues to rise every now and then about the different sensing technologies. And again, this is all about talking to people and explaining to them the technology and putting in very simplistic terms why or this isn't the case or why this may be the case depending on your personal situation. But this is just some of the fears that people have. And this is my favorite, plain old fear of change. Now, I'm never going to do that. And I often tell the story of, by the time computers came into being and cell phones, my parents were well into their 60s. And I can't tell you the number of times that I had to get my computer booted, tell them how to boot theirs, then duplicate my screen so I could help them walk through, just so they could look at an email I sent or something. I never was able to teach them how to text. That was completely beyond them. I had to call. They would answer their cell phone, but no matter how many times I showed them, they never could get that. And, you know, some people just don't like change, and you have to really convince these folks that it will help them. And some will never be convinced. So fundamentally, the community is the customer. We work for them. The worst thing to do is to go into a smart city or into a city and say, you know what? I have this great data aggregation system, or I have this great sensing system that I can tell you this within this amount of time, and this is how you can use it, and I can just install it and it'll be perfect. Because no city is the same. So the first thing you have to do is understand what is the problem of that city. And even within a city, they may have different problems within the different communities. What is their problem, and how can your technology be adapted to solve that problem? And always think of adapting. There is no cookie cutter solution that's going to work. And remember, you're working for the citizens of that city. So then we say a smart and good city, because good is almost, you know, as vague as smart, but seriously, you really use data and technology to improve whatever metrics are driving that city to enhance the citizens' lives. And you have to continue to update that, because the community will ever evolve demographically, and then to meet that city's needs demographically, and different workforces, different businesses will come in. So if we take new technology and don't change the value proposition, or don't change the way we apply it, we're not going to guarantee improvement. And I was a Jetsons kid. I still, you know, I watched Lost in Space. I was certain by now I would have a robot, and I was certain by now I'd be in space, or at least driving a car that flies. And I hope to do that actually someday. If not, I'm going to get my pilot's license. But anyway, if you look on the left-hand side, we have complete congestion on the roadways that we see all the time, except now during COVID. You see Michael Douglas, probably in Road Rage there. It's an old movie. And then you see one lady in the middle of a very busy intersection at a bus stop, not to be the safest location, but alone, unprotected. Over on the right-hand side, here we are in the space age with flying cars. We have a traffic jam in the Skyway. We've got George all angry with road rage during probably a peak congestion time. And then you have Rosie the maid, the only person, fortunately she does have a bubble atop of her, but the only person that has to ride public transit. This mentality has to shift. We have to get out of, we have to own our own product into a shared economy, into a multimodal society where we can use space more efficiently and value the space that's needed properly within our urban infrastructure. So it really depends. I mentioned earlier that every city has its own personality. Even, I've been talking a lot about urban, but talk about exurban, suburban, rural. They all have problems. They all have problems with mobility. They all have problems with getting people to work. They all have problems with seniors aging in place. The solutions won't be the same, but they all have problems that need to be solved. Climate also has a big role in this, and culture. We're starting to see, you know, within New York City, you've got different cultures that think differently about solutions. And of course, we've seen a lot of the autonomous vehicles already going to where it's sunny and warm, mainly where it's sunny and they don't have to deal with snow like we are today. and or rain or dust or any of those elements that sensors are not fond of today. So really they have to vary depending on the demographics that live there, and understanding that that's always shifting. So then we talk about, you know, safe, smart and good mobility. And we talk about that. I say it has to be safe, number one. It has to be safe for the occupants in a vehicle and for the vulnerable road users. We have far too many people that are dying on our roadways today. We kill more people on our roadways than we have with COVID, and a little bit in line with the number that have died with the flu. It has to be efficient, meaning we have to really be thinking about our carbon footprint. And when I say carbon footprint, it's just not what's coming out of the tailpipe, but it's everything in the entire process of making the materials and the components to build the car, what you use in the manufacturing plant to manufacture that product, and the energy you have to use to recycle it at end of life. And then equitable and fair, so that everybody on the roadway feels safe, secure, and you know, not stressed about how they're going to get from A to B. We need to have that seamless integration of technologies. So the Center for Automotive Research, we're an automotive nonprofit, 501c3. We host a number of events throughout the year. We're doing a whole series of webinars right now on COVID-19. Those are free for anybody to sign up. We're doing approximately one a week, and if you've missed them, they're still on our website. We have an affiliates program, which is based for companies, and we also have a communities partnership program, which is a number of municipalities. And then we have a large research group that does everything from economic analysis, labor and workforce analysis, smart cities, smart factories, smart mobility, anything smart. And of course, some of that old-fashioned stuff like propulsion and lightweighting. So thank you very much for your attention. And Charlotte, what would you like me to do from here? Shall I stop sharing, or?
I think we can leave the presentation. So yeah, we'll, so we can ask you questions. So it might be for a few minutes, but you can write down the question. Okay. And also you can speak up, right? But I think for some audience, they can only write the questions.
Okay.
You can see the screen, but I'll start with the question.
All right.
A comment. But so yeah, the movie, Michael Douglas movie is one of my favorite movies, Falling Down.
That's it.
Falling Down, yeah. It's a very, yeah, he then goes to a fast food restaurant, and it's a very good movie. Yeah. So,
I haven't seen it, but one of my colleagues told me about it.
It's very good. I watched it a couple of times.
Okay.
Yeah, it came out in 1993. So now I have a question. Now, on one of the slides you showed smart mobility technologies, but you had a bullet, cooperative automation without public infrastructure. So why without? So because yeah.
Yeah, actually, when we think about vehicles communicating with each other, it's really quite important to be able to have the proper density and spacing, and to know fundamentally what that car is doing. And especially it's been useful in left-hand lane collision reduction, left-hand turn collision reduction.
Right.
So it doesn't require the interaction of the cloud, but it does have vehicles communicate. And actually there are some motorcycle manufacturers also thinking about how they can get their motorcycles to communicate, because that's one of the most frequent causes of accidents is, again, that left-hand turn danger.
So my thought was that if you have interaction with the infrastructure, you might get some speed advisory, and so some incident ahead, so they can slow down comfortably. So I was thinking having a communication with the public infrastructure could be in the play too. So yeah.
Absolutely, and that's in the connectivity side as well. All of those elements are really needed to have the vehicle perform as you want it to, and to really keep it safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I'm done. Other questions from the audience?
Hi, this is Mizan. Thank you for nice presentation. So I have one question. My question is, in one of the slides you said new technology to old values does not guarantee improvement. So that is a barrier actually. So how we are going to overcome that barrier? That's my question. What's your view?
Yeah, and what I learned in Columbus was it really required speaking with the people who were responsible for those policies and that thinking. So, for example, we wanted to put a shuttle downtown, and where I wanted to put it, of course, didn't fit the rules. Buses, you couldn't give up their bus lane, or there were a number of other reasons why it wasn't possible. But actually, after talking to everyone and understanding the purpose, then we could change the rule, or we could find a loophole in the rule to allow you to do it. And especially when we think about building codes and the way that we cause developers to manage buildings, we need to think differently about that. And the only way we think differently is by, finding examples in other places and, changing the mindset. But then you also have to change the mindset of the people who live there, which requires extreme interaction and discussion.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So can you see the question, Carla?
Let me.
Chat in the, or I can also.
Now I can see them. Okay. I haven't done this before and left my presentation open.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I love this first question. Once the pandemic is over, people will move towards using private rather than public. We don't know. We're closely following what's happening in China. And what we're seeing there is DiDi services, for example, has almost gone back up to complete usage as it was before. Public transit is extremely down. And people seem to be starting to buying their own vehicles again, but a lot of them are going for the cheapest car they can find. Because of course, anybody coming from public transit, that's what they need to do. So we don't know, we have to see, and I think it depends how long it lasts. I think it depends on what kinds of cleansing and social distancing is put in place in public transit. I know what's being planned in manufacturing facilities, but I don't know about public transit, what kind of rules will be put in place there. It could be a double-edged sword. We may end up with more vehicles, and then we have to figure out what to do. And then it's an extra double-edged sword for US automakers, because if indeed they want to buy a cheap car, we've stopped making them here. So it's a problem, but we're studying, we're seeing what happens. And I think it depends how long it lasts. I think it depends how long the fear persists. And, is this now a new standard in our life? Are we going to start seeing more and more pandemics because of what we've done to our nature ecosystem? And there's a lot of debate about that. So I have the mentality shift. Okay, I think I've answered both of them. Are there more? Oh, here we go. Zadid Khan, I have a general question about smart cities. What is the best way to make people aware of and make them use? For example, a smart city may have a website that integrates. Yeah. What we found is each area of a city is different. So for example, in Columbus, there are about 6 main areas of downtown, and 2 of those areas were underserved. And in those cases, we actually had to go to those communities and talk to the people because most of them didn't have a computer. Most of them didn't have internet. Most of them did have a smartphone, but their data ran out after about 8 or 9 days. So first we had to start by putting in Wi-Fi hotspots so at least they could continue to get data. But you have to really work with them and teach them. In other cases, yes, you can put it on the website. One of the best practices I've seen in several cities is creating a smart city demonstration building and offering tours to the public, and especially tours to schools, because young children will tell their parents and convince them quickly, or at least bring them to see the technology. And just an interesting fact, when I was in Europe, I lived in Europe for 2 years, I lived in Japan for 5, and I'm very adamant about recycling. And so I was asking some people on a trip to Europe one time, you know, how did everybody become so tied into recycling? Because in the US, we have such a hard time convincing people they should do it. And they said, we started with the children, and it took us a generation and a half to build up that kind of culture. So I really think that's important, to always be talking, have a demo place, have the website. Any way of communication is good. And then Steve asked a question. My question is smart cities will cause fear of surveillance, but without this method, is there any decentralized approach to guarantee efficiency? Yeah, let's assume governments are not trustworthy first, and neither private companies. There is a way to anonymize the data, and that's critical because cities have to do that to utilize the data. And even automakers, they're collecting tons of data. They have to make sure that they can anonymize it to be able to use it. Because if people find that it's totally traceable back to them, it will automatically lead to distrustfulness and somebody knows too much about me, which is fearful. It's hard to be sure that somebody won't use it improperly. So you have to have the right cyber controls on it as well. So it can't be hacked into, and people's personal data can be utilized in a, let's just say, a not good way. But definitely it has to be balanced. And again, people have to feel like they're gaining something by sharing their personal data with you. How are you making their life better? From Jen, how does a smart city help older people and disadvantaged people? Can you give some applications that are happening in Columbus? I think this is really two vulnerable groups that we should be focused on those first. As we know, the aging population is growing exponentially every day, 65 plus. And most of those people will live 10 years beyond their ability to have a driver's license. But most of them want to live in place, and most of them want to have some kind of a social life. Because once people are isolated, then just simply loneliness alone can cause physical and mental deterioration, and eventually can cause them fatalities. So in Smart City Columbus, actually it's not part of the Smart City proposal, but it's part of Smart Campus, which was started by the students on campus. They were working on with a group called National Church Residences, which is one of the largest senior citizens complexes in the country. And they have, within their large facilities, they have full care, where people are basically in a hospital. They have semi-independent and they have fully independent living. So each of those groups needed different ways to get around. And what the director said, or the CEO said, I have a transit bus, and we go to Kroger at a certain time, and we go here or there at certain times. We said nobody uses it, but people are complaining because they can't do what they want to do. And again, it's that set schedule that doesn't work. So the students were really starting to use crowdsourced data to first find the right size of product they should be taking people around in, even within the campus, to put in a shuttle like a May Mobility shuttle to get people safely to the dining hall, for example. So that's just one way, and there's several others, especially now being illustrated with COVID-19, where some of the new smart mobility services are actually beginning to deliver medications and things and groceries and others to those that are homebound. Disadvantaged people. One of the things we did in Columbus